My parents burned in humiliation after seeing I was more successful than the golden child. They walked into the hall like royalty returning home, chins high, grins stretched too wide, clinging to the illusion they'd spent years constructing. My mother adjusted her scarf with the same fussy precision she always used before one of my brother's award ceremonies, and my father's voice boomed across the entrance, laughing just a bit too loud as he recited my brother's latest job title like it was the name of a monarch. "Senior Director at 31, he told one of the hosts, eyes darting subtly toward the growing cluster of alumni near the refreshments. "And my daughter?" "Married to a top architect, expecting there first." I watched it unfold from a distance, standing beside the reception table where my name tag had already been placed with a small gold pin attached, an indicator for special guest speakers, something my father hadn't noticed yet. They didn't see me at first. Even when I walked past, they glanced at me with polite dismissal, the way people look at someone familiar but unimportant. They were too busy catching up with old friends, too busy listing off the accolades of their golden duo. But the air shifted when Mr. Vernon, the school's long-retired principal, stopped me mid-step with a surprised smile. "Is that really you?" he said, looking me over like I'd stepped out of another dimension. "I read about your firm in the papers last week. You built that logistics company everyone's talking about?" Heads turned. My parents' laughter faltered. My mother's hand hovered near her necklace. The name of my company echoed louder than anything else in the room, and suddenly, it was my presence people gravitated toward. The media coverage hadn't been small. One feature in a national publication had spun out into multiple interviews, recognition, and curiosity. What had started as a simple idea in my apartment had grown into a multi-million-dollar business that quietly restructured local supply chains and reshaped how medium-sized retailers operated in 4 states. I hadn't come here to brag. I didn't even want to attend at first. But when the invitation arrived with my name listed as a keynote guest, I knew what this could be. One of those moments life doesn't hand out often. I wasn't there to make them jealous. I didn't need to. Success has a way of wrapping itself around you without saying a word. While my brother recited the same script he'd rehearsed for years, how he'd risen through the corporate ladder, how his MBA at an expensive college had refined his vision, someone else pulled me aside. The event coordinator, clipboard in hand, asked if I could stand near the stage entrance for introduction. My parents' eyes followed me, confusion creeping in. My sister, dressed in a pastel gown too extravagant for the event, paused mid-sentence as someone complimented me on my latest real estate acquisition. They hadn't known about that. They hadn't known I owned the plaza where my sister had just opened her boutique. Then the speech happened. It wasn't long. I didn't speak like someone chasing approval. I spoke like someone who had found a way forward, someone who didn't have to step on a pedestal to be noticed. I spoke about failure, not the polished kind, but the nights I fell asleep on a cot in a rented office, about the early deals that fell through, the silent grind when no one clapped for me. But I kept going, not because I wanted applause, but because silence had made me stronger. After the applause died down, I returned to my seat. The gap between me and my family might as well have been a canyon. My mother's lips trembled as if she wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. My father's posture stiffened, stuck in a pose of misplaced authority. My brother avoided my eyes altogether. The golden child had nothing to say. Later, when the evening faded into handshakes and departing guests, my parents approached. My father tried to regain footing with a hesitant chuckle. "Didn't know you were doing so well." His words stumbled. Not from pride, from discomfort. My mother glanced at the floor. Her smile cracked, eyes glistening with something she'd never shown me before, doubt. "I sent updates," I said simply, not with resentment, but a calm that came from years of building without their recognition. "You never responded." They had no answer, no defense, only silence. I didn't hold anger anymore. I'd outgrown it. Their opinions had stopped shaping my world a long time ago. What I built without them. They weren't there when I turned down the bank's offer to buy me out. They weren't there when I hired my first employee. They weren't there when I turned a single rented office into a chain of properties across the city. They didn't know because they never asked. The spotlight had shifted, not because I demanded it, but because reality did, and there was no undoing it. The last image of them that night was burned into my memory. Standing beside the exit, hesitant to leave, surrounded by conversations that no longer revolved around them, People whispered, not about their perfect children, but about the son they had overlooked, now standing at the center of a success story they never helped write. And as I stepped into the driver's seat of my new car, one custom-built under a brand they'd only seen in commercials, I saw them from the mirror, smaller, quieter, diminished not by failure but by comparison. Not mine, theirs. They had spent their lives building up a fantasy, and tonight, reality burned through it. After the reunion, nothing returned to how it was. Something in the air between us had changed, even without a word spoken about it. For years I had walked through their silence, tried to crack it open with achievements, small gestures, or moments I hoped would finally earn a glance that wasn't followed by comparison. But now they had seen what I'd become, not through stories or secondhand news, but with their own eyes, and it stung them in places no apology could soothe. A few days later, I received a message from my father. Not a call, just a short, uncertain text. We should catch up. The kind of message you send when you're not sure if the door is open. I waited 3 days before replying, not out of spite, but because I had to decide whether there was any point. In the end, I agreed to meet. We sat across from each other in a small cafe, one not far from where I used to walk home from school, when they were late picking me up because my sister had practice, or my brother had a meeting with a tutor. He looked older than I remembered, or maybe he just looked smaller now that I wasn't leaning toward him for approval. He talked about work, retirement plans, even about the old neighborhood. I listened, nodding, not offering much. Then he brought it up. I didn't realize how far you'd come. You didn't ask. He looked down. We thought you were just quiet, always in your own world. No, I just stopped bringing things to people who didn't care. The words weren't said to hurt him. They were plain, without venom, but they landed hard. He knew it wasn't drama. It was just the truth. And when you spend your life ignoring someone, you eventually lose the right to act surprised when they stop showing up. My mother came later that week. Same routine, same attempt to act casual. She brought a tray of cookies, the ones she always used to make for my brother's birthday. I didn't touch them. She sat at the edge of the sofa like a guest, unsure if she had been invited. I saw your interview on TV, she said. You spoke well. Thanks. She hesitated, fingers brushing her bag strap. It must have taken a lot of work. It did. I never realized how much you had going on. You never looked. The silence stretched. This one held weight, not tension, but consequence. She had spent years praising the others out loud while I sat a few feet away, invisible. Not because I was average, but because I was inconvenient. They had picked their favorites early, and nothing I did ever broke that decision. You seemed so distant, she said. You built that distance. She blinked, swallowed, and nodded. I guess we did. There were no apologies, just quiet, awkward acknowledgments wrapped in nervous sentences. I didn't want forgiveness from them. I wasn't there to rebuild a connection that had never existed honestly. I had outgrown their absence long ago. What they were trying to reclaim was access, not closeness. And I wasn't offering either. Weeks passed, then months. They tried small things, comments on social media, birthday messages, occasional invites. I didn't shut them out entirely, but I never leaned back in. My success wasn't a bridge. It wasn't bait. It was mine, and I wasn't handing it over to people who only showed up after the finish line. My brother eventually called. It was brief. He said he wanted to understand how I had built the company. I told him I spent years learning, failing, trying again, that I used everything I had, time, focus, long hours with no certainty, and built piece by piece until the model worked. He was quiet for most of the call, only asking one real question at the end. Why didn't you ever tell me you were doing all that? I answered without hesitation. Because you were never listening. He never called again. My sister sent a thank you message after realizing I owned the property her shop operated in. She'd never known. The landlord she dealt with was my holding company. The day I signed the acquisition papers, I hadn't thought of her once. It was just another asset, another smart buy. But now she understood the dynamic had changed. I hadn't come to her grand opening for a reason. They were all adjusting to a new world where I wasn't waiting for their approval, and that more than anything unsettled them. But I didn't spend time looking back. My company expanded. I brought in more contracts, moved into a new headquarters with full ownership, no debt. My team grew, and I made sure they were paid better than I ever had been in my early days. I bought a house on a hill, nothing massive, but perfectly designed, functional, peaceful, a place where I could shut the door behind me and not feel like I was hiding from anything. One day, I was invited back to the same school to speak again, this time not at a reunion, but as a featured guest for the graduating class. As I walked past the old lockers, memories passed through without sting. The teachers who once gave me side glances in favor of my brother now shook my hand. The staff who never remembered my name now addressed me with professional respect. The shift wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity. After the speech, the headmaster offered me a plaque, a token of appreciation. I accepted it with a polite nod and left soon after, not sticking around to soak in admiration. I had learned something far more valuable than recognition, the satisfaction of not needing it. At home, I took the plaque and placed it on a shelf, not in the center, just to the side. A symbol of something earned, not begged for. And then, without drama or ceremony, I moved on. There were no final confrontations, no dramatic apologies. My parents faded into the background of their own lives, still trying to understand how the son they dismissed had outpaced every expectation. But I didn't owe them a resolution. Closure wasn't something I was waiting for. It had already happened. Success hadn't just changed my life. It had ended the old one completely. The one where I played second to everyone. The one where I explained myself to people who only cared when others were watching.